Next, we're going to go to a case study of how to develop a successful ecosystem for investment. And I'm going to hand over the mic to the chair for this session. She is the co-founder, together with Nir, who we heard of before at the fireside chat, of TechForGood, Omri Boral. Omri, over to you.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being with us. My name is Omri Boral. I'm the co-founder and CEO of TechForGood from Israel. We are very, very happy and proud to collaborate with Innovate for Good in this impact investment forum. And I'm very happy to lead quite an interesting panel, in which we will have three people who are representing three very, very different organizations from Israel. But they all have something that I think is very, very important for you who are listening to us, whether you are investors, entrepreneurs, corporate executives, or policymakers. I think their experience is incredibly relevant to all of you in terms of thinking how we can further develop our own initiatives, but also the general ecosystem, and both the Israeli and the UAE ecosystems in terms of leveraging innovation and technology to do good in the world, which is why we're all here. So without further ado, I will start by letting all of our panelists introduce themselves, and we will start with Zafrir. So the stage is yours.
Hello, shalom, shalom. Really happy to be here. And when Omri asked me to introduce myself, I was forced to think, how do I do that in 2 minutes? And I think that the best way to describe myself is an expert for countries in transition, or in other words, in a more common language, expert in emerging markets. I've been focusing on emerging markets for the past more than 10 years, most of them in the Israeli government. And over the last couple of months, I joined as a partner for a strategic consulting company called Blue Laurel, which connects Israeli entrepreneurs with their counterparts in the GCC. Happy to be here and look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Zafrir. And we're moving on to Hadas, Zucker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hadas Zucker. I lead the business design team in Designit Tel Aviv. Designit is actually a Danish company. It's a global strategic design firm. We were born in Denmark and kind of spread in Scandinavia, Europe, and today we're global with 18 offices around the world, more than 600 passionate designers and interdisciplinary experts, which have been working together for the last 30 years now, and have designed great products, services, and experiences that empower people to live better and more informed life. Essentially, we kind of transform industries, companies, and institutions to become more people-centered, more innovative, and more adaptive, and has worked across a variety of different disciplines, from healthcare to financial services to advanced tech, energy, retail, and entertainment. And even today, being quite active in the impact space, working both with startups in the space, but NGOs, civic organizations, and institutions.
Thank you, Hadas. And last but not least, Ran.
Thank you, Omri. So just before I start, I want to say that I'm really thrilled to see the business and political and personal relationship between people in the UAE and Israel come together and thrive. So this is heartwarming. My name is Grodecki. I'm a managing partner at Bridges Israel. Bridges is an impact investment fund, the largest impact fund in Israel. We manage $80 million under management, and we are an independent affiliate of Bridges Fund Management from the UK, which is a global leader in impact investment and thought. They're managing more than $1 billion. So it's really a privilege to work together side by side with them. To date, we made 10 investments in Israeli companies, all of them impactful companies. And we do that across very different industry segments, from sustainable tourism to water technology, agrotechnology, healthcare companies, and more. And just to elaborate, when we say impact, what we mean is really we make investments for market rate financial returns, or better if we can. So we do not subsidize the financial returns for better impact. But at the same time, we do not execute any investment without making sure that the actual business of the company generates significant and measurable positive social or environmental impact. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, Ran. So as you can see, each of these people have very, very different lines of business and activity, and impact is intertwined in each of them. And I think that's part of the complexity of the discussions in the impact world, is that just like Ran mentioned a minute ago, impact is being perceived in very, very different ways by different organizations and different people. And many times we start by trying to define what impact is. So I thought that for this panel, what would be maybe more interesting and more valuable for all of you listening to us is I've asked each of our panelists to give us a case study of how their activity generates positive impact, in what way, and how they are seeing the impact as part of the business or the actual activity of the initiative. It's not a separate thing. It's not taking part of the profits and then donating some of them. It's the actual thing itself. And I think what you will see from these case studies is that there are many different ways in which we can execute or implement impact intentionality, impact drive. And in all of them, there is a very, very strong relationship to the business model and to the financial sustainability of that initiative. So this time we will start with Hadas. And if you could please share with us a case study in which Designit was engaged in impact activity.
Sure, thank you, Omri. Well, you know, you asked for me to share a case study, but I really think that what I'm going to share now is a little bit more than that. It's really a little bit of a story of a vision coming to life. It's about a legacy in the making, or really about a story about a person with a strong passion for impact and social good, which have matured through the mutual journey to create a holistic, sustainable venture out of his passion for giving. So to make the story short, a few months ago, a high net worth individual, which is active mostly in Africa and developing countries, kind of approached us. And he said, well, I have quite a successful enterprise and business, and I'm doing philanthropy for a long time on the side. And how do I match those two things? Like, how do I create a venture that, traditionally was separate, right? You would do your business, you would make money, and then you would contribute to philanthropy. And the will was to create a structure that would unite those two approaches and kind of create a powerhouse of an impact ecosystem, which is blending those two approaches and kind of leveraging both creativity, but both resilient access to capital to create this structure and to facilitate the activities and the impact initiatives that will enable them to promote prosperity and well-being. So really the journey that we embarked on was a journey of co-creation. We worked together with his team. We worked together from the ground up through a series of interviews and workshops and co-creation sessions, which kind of helped us to harness the methodology of shared value design, of understanding how we put people in the center, but also the environment and the planet, and kind of create an ecosystem that is able to orchestrate and create partnerships and to define those activities, to define the outcomes and the goals of the foundation, and to create those solutions that will be able to streamline in an effective way the purpose the foundation is meant for. And then the outcome, so essentially the outcome of the project was creating a foundation, Menumadin Foundation, which essentially has 3 arms of activity. One of them focused on strategic philanthropy, the other one around impact investing, and the third one around blended impact and private and public partnerships, all of them are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and are really pursuing this vision of narrowing the gap of social and economic gap of people.
Thank you. That's kind of taking a lot of work. I know months and months of work and thought process into a few minutes.
Yeah.
And I think if we'll have time, then I'm happy to hear a little bit more about the final outcome. And if you have any tips or advice for people who are coming from the same angle of being very successful business people who are now looking at forming their own impact investment vehicle and trying to find that intersection between their existing activity and their wish to generate positive impact. So we'll get to that in a bit. Ran, we'll now move to your case study.
Sure. So imagine a farmer. He lives in India, and he's a few hundred kilometers north of Delhi, which is a very arid area. He owns 10 acres. He's a farmer, and for decades he used to cultivate it with rice, and he used to irrigate this area with flood irrigation because water was abundant, but it is still a dry area. In the last decade, because of global warming and water shortages, the government took a quota. So he cannot do the same thing he used to do for decades, his family used to do. And what he has to do is to switch to a different crop with a higher risk and to cultivate only 6 acres out of the 10. So his income is also reduced, his risk is higher, and just because of water, shortage of water. Bridges invested in a fascinating company called Endrip. Endrip invented a new way of doing drip irrigation. The traditional drip irrigation, which could have been a solution for the Indian farmer in our story, is using usually or typically high water pressure in order to regulate the water across the lateral. And for this high water pressure, you need pumps, you need filters, you need a lot of energy, both capital expenditures, OPEX, and the end result is that this becomes too expensive, prohibitively expensive for what's called commodity crops like the rice. It does, however, provide an excellent agricultural solution for high yield crops, tomatoes, cherries, etc. And the company we invested in developed a new method of drip irrigation that does not use energy at all, zero energy. They use instead gravity. It's a design, so Designit is relevant in this case. The design is everything. It's a design of a drip unit that allows gravity alone to have very long laterals across very large fields, and it operates beautifully in the field. And the result for such a farmer is that he saves 50% of the water used, so he can now cultivate the full 10 acres with the same quantity of water allowed, but it also increases the yield of the crop by 15 to 20% because it's more efficient compared to flood irrigation. So it's really a win-win situation. And this company is already commercial with subsidiaries both in Australia and the US, and now with an amazing model for smallholder farmers, Southeast Asia and Africa. And here you see an amazing example of a very significant impact for the farmer, both his livelihood and the environment, etc., but also a very, very encouraging business model. And when you have a very encouraging business model, this means this company can become sustainable for the long term and generate impact for the long term. So it goes hand in hand. So technology together with design and innovative thought and the notion of identify gaps and make the world better by fulfilling these gaps makes a lot of sense to us.
Thank you. I definitely agree with the last point you made that you know, we can strive to do impact, but if the company itself doesn't have a strong business model, it will not stay alive. It will not scale. And then we'll lose both on the impact side and, of course, on the financial side. So definitely finding that intersection is a big part of your perspective, and I think of many impact investors' perspective. So thank you. And Zafrir, we're on to you.
I'm grateful to have met Rana just 10 minutes ago, because he provided the excellent background to the case study I would like to share. Think of Andrew that Ran just presented, and think of what happens when the fund exits and this company needs to get access to the market and understand the challenges of each and every market. And now think of 10 NDRIPs and 100 NDRIPs and 1,000 and 100,000 companies like NDRIP, and maybe like the company you represent or work for or trying to start. So, and this is the challenge that we had faced. And how can we support Israeli companies and other tech companies in accessing the market in developing countries in different challenges, from healthcare to financial inclusion, water, agriculture, and so on. One of the things that we realized early on is that we don't have all the information. We grew up in a developed country, relatively rich. We cannot really even start to understand the needs and the challenges that are faced by the customers in these markets. So we partner with IFC. IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank. It's probably the largest investor in tech companies in developing countries. It invests around $18 billion a year in different projects and equity in companies and project finance. And they came up and said, okay, we have a problem with service providers, hospitals in India. They are reluctant to try new things. They're reluctant to adopt new innovation. Can we create a program that would maybe bridge that gap? First, help the hospitals try new technologies, and then help startups access the market. And that's how we created TechEmerge 5 years ago. It's a partnership between Israel, IFC, and the government of Finland. Basically, it's a program that matches the needs of hospitals in developing countries with the capabilities of startups around the world. It was very successful in India, and then duplicated again in Brazil, in East Africa, and then moved over to different sectors like energy and agriculture. And I think that it teaches us that we don't know all the answers. We're not really able to understand the deep needs of our clients in other countries. And that's why we always should look for partners on the ground, partners that have the expertise and the experience that could mitigate those gaps, that could maybe present to us different solutions or different ideas on how we can solve certain problems, and look at it from different perspectives, from the financial perspective, from the human behavior perspective, from the technology perspective, regulation, obviously. And I was grateful to be part of that program, which ended up to be winning the World Bank Innovation Award in 2018.
Wonderful. Thank you. I love this example because I think the innovation here is in so many levels. It's using innovative technologies to be implemented in different geographies and different regions, but there's also the innovation of creating this platform in which governments and international civil society organizations, for that matter, collaborate with business-oriented organizations. And this is, I think, a very innovative mindset, which is now becoming a super trend. But it is still quite a challenge to create those platforms. And I think the key word,
tech is just the first step. But having said that, I don't want to discourage the audience. There are plenty of organizations and people with whom you can talk to, and would be happy to support you in fine-tuning your solutions, adding to the tech the other components.
Exactly. So I I agree that I think the key is collaboration and finding the right partners to complete or to complement your abilities and create these kind of jump boards for the growth of the entire ecosystem. And this kind of leads us to now looking at the Israeli ecosystem in which you are all leaders in and have been working very hard, I know, in the past few years to promote it, to get it to the mature stage that it is now in. We still have a long way to go. But I think when you're looking at the Gulf area or the growing ecosystem of impact-related innovation and investment in the United Arab Emirates, where do you see, do they complement each other? Where can we find the bridge and the commonalities, and in what way the Israeli ecosystem can contribute to the one in UAE and vice versa? So very curious to hear your thoughts on that. So Zafrir, we'll start with you this
time. It's a privilege to be the first one because my answer can be summed up in two words: regional and international. I think the two ecosystems can complement each other if, and I would say only if, companies and entrepreneurs from both sides think regionally and think globally. The two markets by themselves are just too small. And to be honest, most of us live in relatively rich countries that can solve most of the problems by themselves. I'm not saying that there are no injustices, but we can solve most of our problems ourselves. But the business opportunity as well as the real impact lies in making significant change, whether it's in the region or in international markets. So I think that the discussion between Israelis and Emiratis or Israeli and counterparts from the GCC community could really create amazing ideas that can solve problems in the region and beyond.
Thank you. Ran?
So first, the first word that comes to my mind is trust. So we need first, I think it's a process. We need to build trust between people, between nations, between companies. And I think from many discussions with friends that have visited and talked with people in the Emirates, I think it's going well, it's going in the right direction. But then the next step is to make it practical. And at least in my world, in the investment world, you have two main, I would say, areas to cooperate. One is actually investments, which you can do either directly into companies, into Israeli tech companies, or vice versa. But you can also invest in Israeli platforms like ourselves, but others as well, that then be your kind of leg or physical presence in the Israeli market. Find the right companies, support them, and make them global, because the aspiration of the Israeli companies, because it's a small market, is go global, like Zafrir said. And then the second layer, which is not less important, is in the area of business relations or business development efforts. So any one of the companies we have invested in is looking to grow globally, and the UAE is interesting because it's a gateway not only to the geography itself, but to a lot of the world, the Arab world and others. It's a trading hub for a very significant one for a lot of other countries. And I think that Israeli technology with trading capability that exists in the Emirates is a great combination, and together we can achieve a lot.
Thank you. Hadas.
So I share a lot of the perspective of Zafrir and Ran, obviously. We all share the kind of same challenges, which are the result of the region that we at. And I think essentially what we have is great conditions to start with, right? There's a great entrepreneurial thirst. There's a larger access to capital, as we really see a generation changing and a mindset changing, people that want to solve real problems, people that are willing to collaborate and to create new business structures that have not been seen before. And I think what we can contribute to each other is, taking on the right methodologies and the right mindset to understand the needs, to uncover different mental models, to uncover the different behavioral structures, to have a humane perspective on how we can make scalable solutions that really benefit to well-being of communities, which are essentially different, and then to ground it to a solid venture structure.
Great, so it sounds quite simple. So you're saying we need to build trust, we need to uncover together what can be done, and then we need to think not per country, but per region, and then globally. So sounds like it's quite a few simple steps, and you're there.
We have a plan.
Yeah, exactly. So of course, it's not only more complicated than that, but also I think that for many of the people who are present in this event, many of them are just making their first steps. So there are many, many layers to the complexities of this. It means understanding how you define impact and in what way you would like to perceive it and implement it. It's about finding that intersection, as we spoke about earlier, between the business logic and the impact drive that kind of leads you. It's about finding the right resources or the right partners to collaborate with, and then find the platforms to take you on that kind of path to scale whatever it is that you are doing. And we have quite a diverse audience with us. So for the last part of this panel, what I asked all of you to kind of think about a tip or something from your experience that you're kind of taking to that very, very long journey, and to maybe share it with the audience in thinking about the next step or what they need to keep in mind when they're making those first steps and thought processes. And that will be our final round, and with that we will conclude. So Ran, I'll let you begin.
So I don't have to tell everybody, I'm sure you share my view that investments or business, you should always look for the best people and develop the best products. That's obvious. But taking the impact lens, which we lead in Israel, I would want you to focus on two concepts. If you are serious about impact, first you need to measure. Things that you do not measure are not managed. And we have a very solid and significant framework for impact measurement based on the impact management project that is followed by Bridges UK. And we, before a transaction and during the holding period, we measure, we identify the key KPIs, we discuss it, it becomes a managed topic. So measurement is key, and reporting and managing it through it. And the second concept, I mentioned it, but just to phrase it into a term, we call it lockstep. So we look for businesses that have lockstep between the business success and the impact. Always imagine, if my company will succeed and grow, will I lose the impact, or is it really embedded within the business model?
Thank you. Hadas?
And so I guess the best tip that I could think of is really about embracing a new mindset. It's really about the ability of, both individuals, technologies, people that come from, from the capital, creative people, business leaders of cooperation, to really see impact as as a lens for innovation, as a springboard. And I know there's a lot of buzzwords and misconceptions about it, and a lot of excitement around the field. And then the best tip is really to take a step, to stop for a minute and to try to identify, what does that mean for you? What does it means? How might you use it as a tool for transformation? How might you use impact to address gaps in growth that you experience in your corporation? in gaps in relevance to, you know, new underrepresented segments of populations? How might you propel your differentiation in the competitive landscape through impact? And once you do that, you need to ask yourself, exactly as Ran said, how might you turn your, you know, theory of change to your impact thesis into your growth thesis. Coming from the School of Strategic Design and from the understanding that, you know, if you go out of the building, talk to people, again, uncover their needs and try to hypothesize about the solution that might work for them, and then, you know, look at the wide variety of your stakeholders, involve them in the process of creating those solutions, test your hypothesis and keep on iterating, and then grounded with a strong business model. I guess it's not a bad way to start and build your impact business.
Thank you.
These are excellent excellent tips I've already learned, and I think that I would echo Hadas and say that listening to people maybe is one of the key tips that we can offer you. But again, as I mentioned, my background is with the government, and I'm currently in the private sector, so I would juggle between the two. And whenever I meet a company, or whenever my partners at Laurel meet a company, the first question that we ask is, what problem do you solve? And it's different than answering the question, what do you do? What problem do you solve is not what do you do? And if you cannot phrase the problem or explain the problem that you're solving and how you solve it in 2 or 3 sentences, then you're probably off track. And this is time to go back to talking to people and redefine the problem that you're solving. So that would be my first tip. Second tip, coming from government and having taken part in designing government strategies, it's sometimes very confusing, both in our countries as well as in developing countries. You always hear about these 2030, 2050, 2070 strategies, lots of big words, affiliate some kind of link to the SDGs, and it can be very confusing and can be a bit misleading. So my advice here, as someone who was on the other side and wrote those strategies, is try to be vaguely connected to those long-term strategies, but only vaguely. If you're more or less around what the government is trying to do, then you're probably dealing with things that are at the core of interest of both the government and the people you live within your country. But again, don't wait for the government for clear guidance on how to do things and when to do things and like very detailed work plan. It's just doesn't work like that. And in the entrepreneurial work, it's very important to just keep moving, talk to people, define the challenge or the problem you're solving, and just move on. And happy to, as my colleague said, happy to talk further. Connect me on LinkedIn and my colleagues here, and I think we'll have very interesting discussions.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you all for taking the time to share with us your perspective, your experience, and your insights. I personally think it was fascinating, and I hope that the audience as well. And as Zafrir mentioned, I think we are all very, very open to discussing with any of you, any thoughts that you have to think together. I think, you know, the world is there already. But there is still such potential and so much that we can do and that we need to do and actually invent, whether it's new technologies, new business models, new cross-sector collaboration models to really achieve both the global goals and kind of the new economy that we're all fantasizing about. And with that, we will say goodbye and thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.